Hi. Matthew said he's going to be a couple minutes, so might as well wait for him to join this.
Hi there.
Hey,
I was a bit late to join. Um, where to begin? Um, we submitted the work group presentation um, that was uh, that was under discussion in I think the last meeting. Um, yeah, no major edits, but we put it onto the and put it onto the Google Drive if people want to have a look over exactly what was submitted. And it's going to be subject to like a review and then suggested edits process. So once the comments are in as well, I can share that with the group as they come in. I think it's the end of this week, the end of the review process. Don't know if anyone have a better
yeah,
grip on it.
yeah, it's the end of this week. I think we need to provide a review each as well.
Yeah,
Um, I need to do mine. I'll do it after this call, I think. Um, yeah, there was a training um call as well around how to do the review, and I think there's a meeting recap that you can check out. So there's an email sent today.
yeah. I joined that and found out quite quickly that I'd made some errors in in what was submitted. It turns out you are meant to have two title slides, where I thought that it was meant to be a either or, depending on whether it was a panel or not. Um,
Oh, okay.
So that's an immediate bit of feedback. Will probably be put the title slide back in. But yeah. I mean, it is worth the recap. I think people were asking about like what red flags they needed to look out for in the review, and there wasn't a clear steer on it. So I think it will be sort of depend on what the people reviewing it think with the comments as much as what the OCP guidance is. But I think there are OCP sort of staffers who'll be reviewing as well, who maybe will be doing the OCP angle. I don't know, if, Russ, whether you have any knowledge of the review process from that perspective that you can share with us.
Yeah, so there's just a couple people assigned per project. I'll go look it up to see who's assigned. I may be one of them. But yeah, it is from the foundation staff perspective, they're looking for all the, do we have the right disclosures, all those legal pieces, formatting pieces, kind of those standards. And if I'm assigned, then I'll do a little bit more looking at the content. But I think generally you're doing that already here. So that's the expectation, is that the content itself is reviewed here in whatever fashion you're doing it. And that's the new guy speaking too, by the way. So all the formatting pieces, and for me, I'm ignorant on that, and I plan to stay relatively ignorant on that. I plan more about content type reviews, and I will look it up and come back in a minute here.
I appreciate that. And I guess one thing to share with the group. So we had a call just before this one, talking about this digital twin work group becoming a strategic initiative, and what that means. And as part of it, there's a suggestion to have a sort of in-person, I guess, open meeting at the summit on, I think you suggested the day after the track, Karush, to try and sort of, I guess, get people in person to engage with what we're doing and get a feel for, I guess, what they would hope to see coming out of the foundation. I mean, obviously, to the greatest extent possible, it will be framed around what the strategic initiative kind of goals and intended outcomes are. But I think it will be useful to get a feel for what people want from that, I guess, and where their priorities lie and stuff. So I think that should be quite a productive session. Yeah, I don't know, because we did talk as well about, there's a placeholder in the presentation at the end for a QR code for a poll. But I wonder, off the back of the conversation, there was talk of kind of sending out a much wider survey to OCP sort of membership and mailing lists and through the social channels. So I'd be interested to hear what members of the group think on whether we should push ahead with a sort of QR code based poll as part of that presentation, or maybe just talk about the fact that we intend to send out a survey. It'd obviously be easier not to have to pull a poll together in advance.
Yeah, I hadn't realized that they could target specific kind of expertise and things like that within the poll. So it might be better to hold off like a blanket poll that we organize and do it through OCP properly.
Yeah, maybe that's something to understand, because it could be something even where we just have a QR code that's like, sign up to this mailing list, that would maybe I don't know if it would get through any better, but we could at least have sort of people expressing interest that we could follow up with, and if they haven't responded to the survey, we could maybe pick that up and follow up with them or something. Don't know. Maybe that's something to pick the brains of the OCP staff on what's been successful in the past.
I mean, at the very
Yeah,
least, you could just have the QR code linked to the strategic initiative page, or link
Yeah.
to the Groups IO sign-up.
Yeah, that probably would be better than the URL. That was actually something that did get brought up in the conversation about the review process. There's a guy who's been on these calls before, but I've forgotten his name. It's a bit embarrassing. But the guy who was on the podcast, who came on sort of just before going on a podcast to talk about digital twins. But he was saying, you know, is it valid feedback to basically say to people, don't put a URL, put a QR code, because, you know, in a presentation, it's not so easy to engage with a URL, whereas pulling your phone out and scanning a QR code is more straightforward. Maybe less so if you've got multiple QR codes on a single slide, but yeah, I think that's probably a good suggestion. I think the groups.io idea is actually probably the best one, because then we can use the groups.io channel to advertise the fact that the survey is being distributed and say to people to keep an eye out for the emails and such like. You know, if we know where it's going to be sent from, even saying like make sure they're on the safe senders list so it doesn't go into spam or like into a side folder or whatever.
Yeah, that definitely makes more sense.
Okay.
Yeah, I still have problem with the emails. With OCP emails, I get some of it. I don't get rest. Especially on
Yeah.
this group, I kind of don't get much emails.
Yeah, I remember you saying about that.
Yeah.
Because like when the calendar like change came out and stuff, you weren't getting them, were you?
No, I'm not getting any of them. I even check my spam folder. It doesn't go there either.
That's
You
weird.
don't get the call notifications or the call event in your calendar.
So I have an invite that was sent long time ago, and that's for basically based on weekly call, not bi-weekly. So, and I don't get any other updates for some reason.
And you don't get the bi-weekly emails that I set it
No.
up so that it sends a message to say, hey, it's the call starting now. You don't get any of those either.
No, nothing. No.
Weird.
I used to get those like 10 minutes before the meeting, as like an email reminder, but not now, not anymore.
I mean, do others get them that are subscribed? Steve, Rishab, do you get groups.io messages through? I mean, I've heard people before, if they haven't emailed a certain domain, then they don't get emails from that domain, sort of thing. But
so I am getting the emails that come out just before the meetings. So those are showing up in my inbox. I'm not really seeing any other traffic from this group, but I'm seeing those for sure.
yeah, there's not huge amounts. There was one that was sent out to the sort of like all recipient from memory, because I remember there was a moderation message about it, which I do remember seeing. That would maybe be a good test for like the non-meeting ones.
I don't think I'm seeing much emails from my front from this work group.
Do you get the notification reminders?
I have this calendar invite, and this is probably my first or second time joining these calls. I've not seen any other activity, but I can check again just to make sure.
There's not huge amounts, to be honest. Other than the sort of meeting invites at this point. There was one for sure that was much more general one. I'll find it now. Okay, I wonder if we do need to. Well, we could do a test maybe afterwards to see whether they do get through when you get them, if you see what I mean. Certainly it won't be useful as a messaging channel if people don't get messages.
Yep, I don't see any other emails from this work group, Stephen.
Okay. Mildly concerning. Are you subscribed to is everyone subscribed to the RSS feed with the calendar feed from Group Slayer?
I'm not sure if I'm subscribed either. I assumed I was because I was having this invite, but I can check.
We have had problems in the past where the invites didn't give any kind of notification in people's calendar applications. And also that they didn't update to reflect what was actually in the group IO calendar. Like for instance, when we switched from weekly to bi-weekly calls.
Yeah, FYI, just having the calendar event is not indicative of being subscribed. There's multiple ways to get the calendar event on your calendar.
Got it.
Yeah, I've just found that other message I was talking about. It was like 25th of August. There was one that got sent out on the OCP Digital Twin channel. It was invitation to Smart City, Remcom, EM Urban something or other, Urban Propagation. Excuse me. So I think if you've got a message with Remcom in the subject on the 25th of August from groups.io, then the sort of the broadcast messages are getting through, even if the event messages aren't. Should we, given the conversation in the last meeting around getting the white paper to a point of finalization, should we have a quick skim through that and talk about where we need to work on it?
Yeah.
Would you mind doing the honors? Because I think I'm in one of my stages where I can't access the Google Drive.
Yeah, give me a second.
This is a periodic thing with information security in my employer's business for the others that don't know why Stephen was wryly laughing at that. Yeah, you're not allowed to perform this action. Very good.
Hopefully you can all see that and read it.
Yep.
Is it too big, too small? Any adjustments needed, or is it fine? Right.
Works for me. Leave the others to.
All good.
Okay. Yeah, so think it progress on it kind of stalled over August because everyone's off various times. But we are getting fairly close to completion on this now. For those that went in the previous call, in order to release this in time for the global summit, we essentially need to present it to the wider DCF project call on the 17th of September. So essentially we need to finalize this pretty soon. And then someone needs to present it to DCF call on the 17th. As long as that goes okay, then there will be a further 2-week period where they can request or where it's reviewed, and they can request changes and things, or make suggestions. And then I think, assuming everything goes okay, then the thing gets released. So that would put us basically in time for the global summit. So we're pretty close. A kind of small concerted effort would probably push this over the line fairly quickly. Where we're at the moment, so obviously the dotting the i's and crossing the t's in terms of finalizing things like changing the date and all that kind of stuff needs to be done, as well as an executive summary. By and large, the introduction is there. Probably a little bit more needs to be done on kind of what is a digital twin. Then we've got use cases. Use cases is fairly comprehensive now. This kind of bullet point section needs to be converted to prose with these small bullet point sections. And then we obviously need to arrange them. So we have these case studies dotted throughout this section that needs to be smartened up. And all these like 3 bullet point sections could do with being converted into real text. What's the plan for that section? So that's all good. Technical challenges. This kind of goes over some of the challenges involved in developing digital twins, not necessarily in adopting them or kind of putting them into practice, which is maybe something that someone could add to this. But it kind of discusses some of the semantic challenges involved, kind of dealing with enabling technologies that allow for interoperability. Brief discussion there. Got specific simulation challenges like synchronization, causality, rollback, time step management, that kind of stuff. And data validation and data management and validation. This section could probably do with input in terms of any difficulty in implementing a digital twin into a site or incorporating it into a site, and also probably could do with some input on security. I don't think there's anything in here about data security yet. That's a very big topic that I didn't want to address when writing this. And then finally, we've got the paths to adoption. Got the kind of the level matrix that we've talked about previously. I think that's also in the presentation, if I'm right, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. And I was going to round out this section, kind of breaking this down into a kind of subsystem basically a big table. So you've got along the top, you've got the columns of each of the different levels of digital twin, and along the rows potentially you've got kind of a either a subsystem of the data center itself or some aspect of the digital twin, kind of a feature of a digital twin. So you kind of get a sense of what these levels mean for the different subsystems that we've talked about previously. Because we've talked about not having a fully capable monolith level 5 digital twin where everything is all under one roof and everything's all working wonderfully. We've talked a lot in previous calls around how we see the need for interoperability primarily because tools deal with specific subsystems. So your power, your cooling, your workload, all those things will be more likely dealt with in separate tools, at least for the foreseeable future. So the question is, what do those levels look like in those different subsystems? And then we do need to write a conclusion, but that should be relatively short. And we need to talk about next steps, which we did discuss on the previous call. Essentially, both of these are good options, probably not mutually exclusive options. Interoperability, I think, is where lots of us would like to get to, where we're talking about how we standardize digital twins in the data center space, and how they can actually talk to each other.
Look at just one quick point on that section 5. I'm a little bit wary of best practices, because I think it's a bit of a rabbit hole if we're going to try and talk about best practices. It's either going to be very, very high level, or it will be a rabbit hole trying to talk about best practices in subsystems that we don't necessarily have intimate knowledge of.
Yeah.
So I wonder whether one of the follow-ons from the initial white paper could be development of best practices guidance, if you see what I mean. Because I feel like that's something that we could really do with crowdsourcing from like a larger group than what we've got available to us. It also means we don't have to not trying to sound work shy, but
don't have to write it right now. Yes, and that would dovetail quite nicely with the with alignment to the OCP ready spec. So we start with if we were to start with kind of developing some best practice document, adding in a, how does this align with OCP ready, potentially some kind of assessment matrix type thing. That's probably a pretty complete kind of unit of work. It gives some value to the OCP community, and then will lead us into, okay, so now we've said how you can use digital twins, how we assess what digital twins do. Now, how do we stick them together and make them talk to each other, which is the interoperability. That could be a good path for us to chart. I'm not sure what anyone else thinks.
I think that would make sense. Because as well, to my mind, as well as being sort of like best practices from the perspective of the OCP ready framework, I think there's also potential for best practices for providers in terms of protocols, frequencies, like data formats, all that kind of stuff. And that's potentially from what was being spoken about before about the telemetry paper. That's maybe something that we can, depending on the point at which that becomes published, we could potentially draw upon as a source for talking about what should be presented and consumed and supported, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And then if we've got an initial, like, or if we can at least reference, here's what telemetry should look like, here's what the data sources of a digital twin should look like, here's how you should be using your digital twin, or how we would expect a digital twin to be used. Then talking about interoperability is probably a lot easier at that point.
Where does the interop come into play with your digital twin levels?
So to an extent, I think it would actually almost be so where Stephen, and correct me if I'm getting what you said wrong, Steve, but where you were talking about turning this table of sort of like different levels into what those levels might look like for different subsystems, it's almost how those subsystem digital twins can work together, if you see what I mean, rather than, so I don't know that it's necessarily within these levels even, to my mind, but you know, I'm obviously open to.
Yeah, I kind of
opinion.
I think of it as kind of a separate dimension. It's an enabling dimension as opposed to a definitional dimension of digital twins. So this level format is well, so fundamentally you can talk about digital twin as modeling kind of just one aspect of a system, which is what we kind of have at the moment. So if you're talking about, say, cooling, your levels 1 and 2 are just cooling telemetry. Level 3 is you're doing simulations, you're doing CFD analysis, that kind of stuff. Level 4 is probably your starting to integrate with the control systems, monitoring CDUs and providing some kind of operational either alerts or changes to the CDU. And then 5 is kind of fully hands off. The cooling system is kind of self-monitoring, adapting to other changes you make in the data center and environmental changes. And yeah, and then that would be a level 5. So there doesn't necessarily have to be a interoperability within that. But the argument for interoperability is that, say, for instance, if your cooling simulation is also aware of power, or also aware of which servers are on or off, or you know, the fan levels of each server, that kind of thing, you can get a more accurate picture in your simulation, and therefore a more accurate answer that the digital twin can provide to either a human operator or to its own controlled autonomous systems. Does that make sense?
Okay. I followed. And I think it would be useful for you to kind of describe that interop expectation and why it's a challenge and why it's a good thing to go after. It's actually a different interop than I was thinking of. And again, I haven't read the white paper, so fooled by my own thoughts about what we might be looking to get to work together.
Okay. Well, what were you thinking?
So again, being very, very new to this, and I have sat in.
No, I mean the perspective of someone new and someone who's thinking, what does interop mean? That's important for us.
So I came into this going, hey, this is about models, the data that you get to support the models. And I started thinking about, I'm a hardware guy. So we have many different standards of how you do simulation, right? So here's an IBIS standard that handles how you do simplified receiver transmitters and how you simulate the channel. And, you know, so that's a format of data. It's a protocol that goes with it. And so I started thinking about, these different models, correlation of models, exchange of data, kind of a standards type, and different than what you're talking about with the interop, because what you described could still be done by one solution, right? It doesn't take partners per se.
It doesn't take partners necessarily, but you still have to think about those issues that you mentioned. Those are kind of talked about up here a little bit. So you've got kind of FMI, USD. Oh yeah. These are similar kind of data interop standards. USD, I think, Karush, you can correct me, is more of a data interop standard and an environment. FMI is more focused on kind of model exchange. So in that sense of kind of defining what the inputs and outputs of your models are, what the behaviors of your model are, so that they can then be glued together for co-simulation. That's all kind of included in the interoperability problem, as well as all of these synchronization, causality, discrete versus continuous simulations, that kind of stuff. It is all still relevant to that.
But when
that
you
issue.
spoke to it, it's not an integral part of your levels, right? There's nowhere in there that it's a dependency. Well, I must have this, otherwise I can't get to level 3, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So in my view, the autonomous system level that kind of the bright and shiny of digital twins that people kind of present, that's only really achievable when you have interoperability between the simulations. You have co-simulations running for all of the different physics systems that are in the data center. I'd say this is you only reach the kind of promised land of digital twins if you can achieve the interop and then you have autonomous systems. But from the definitions that everyone in the industry uses around what is a digital twin, it doesn't necessarily have to be kind of a multi-physics representation. There's a slight distinction there, but yeah, a digital twin in and of itself doesn't necessarily need to consider more than kind of one aspect of a system, essentially, to be considered a digital twin.
Okay. Just to kind of understand the scope, do you envision a world where a CDU supplier says, here's my model, we'll plug it in?
I'd hope that's where we could get to.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah,
that's a very similar model to automotive engineering. Like they spec out subsystems and then they are provided with both the simulation, a hardware in the loop simulation, but also provided with the software simulation that then they can integrate into wider simulations for testing purposes. I would imagine we could hopefully get to something similar.
Okay. Yeah, I think after this discussion, I don't see a difference. There's a scope and timeline piece and everything, but I think my statement earlier of I see it, I was thinking it was different. No, I get it.
No, yeah, it's yeah, you're on track. So that's kind of where the paper is at. There's obviously a little bit more work to do. anyone wants to volunteer for any particular section or
Well, my name is already against one of them, I think, when we were skimming down those comments. It's got MK
Yeah.
to consolidate some bullet points,
yeah.
but presumably even further down than that, should probably commit to. Yeah, because there was some sort of duplication, wasn't there, with bullets and then throws elsewhere that I need to check over as well.
Yeah, I think there's this is duplicate, but this is now this
My
is the
section
section.
plan, okay, nice. Yeah, that
Yeah.
clarifies it.
I think we added this plan to help identify that this was the section plan as opposed to any actual content.
No, we can't hear you, Karish. At least I couldn't.
I can't hear you either, Kurush.
How about now?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I was talking about the previous conversation on CDUs. So we started the initiative a couple of months ago, basically talking to most of the major CDU manufacturers, and basically trying to we started with one POC, trying to understand in terms of geometry and the metadata that needs to be included in the digital twin, where we are going through, and if OpenUSD is kind of a correct file format, or basically FMI and FAU. And I think we had a good progress. Steve Blackwell can kind of confirm that we're working heavily with them to kind of understand this, and also working on with ISVs to they can absorb the metadata and do the simulation on the liquid cooling part. So I think we are in good shape in that direction, but we are going to expand this to kind of broader audience, like heat rejection unit systems and so on. So we are not going to stay at TCS loop. We're going to expand it to FWS loop as well, that we can basically have a fairly good quality digital twin for the entire liquid cooling system.
Yeah, Karush, I concur with what you just said. That is our perspective as well.
And does that mean that CDU vendors are going to provide like behavioral models as well as geometry models, or is it mostly focused on geometry?
Ultimately, we're going to need to provide behavioral models. We're working with the NVIDIA team. We're also working with a couple of different simulation tool providers to try to find the most effective way to provide those operational models. There's some magic in getting the right level of precision so that they are sufficiently accurate to be interesting, while not being so thorough that they're computationally difficult as you start looking at the entire data center. So it's hitting that right mix. We're still working with the vendors to figure out exactly how much detail of what type they can most readily consume. And so there's still work to be done on that front, but definitely moving in what I think is a productive direction there.
Yeah, completely agree. So basically, the level of details that we want to add is kind of the most important and key parameter here. So as an example, for geometry, are we only talking about the shell of the CDU, or we're talking about adding basically the pipes, the pumps and the coil and so on. So because one thing that we need to kind of be careful of is sharing any IP of any manufacturer. So that's why we are dealing with all these different steps. And then when it gets to the metadata, we started thinking that at the design level, basically, we want to have the performance curves, somehow a little bit of the control systems, and then are they coming as a single file, or basically they're going to be a separate file coming with the geometry that can be kind of help with the simulation. And then once we are getting to the time domain analysis, or basically operational side of it, things are getting more and more complicated, and we need more and more data in that direction. So it's kind of a journey of live and learn, and we are keep adding to it, and we are having kind of a better understanding now. But it takes time that we can have a good kind of POC that we can expand this and make it as like a standard for other kind of CDU vendors.
Cool. That sounds really exciting.
Something that I kind of wanted to mention earlier as well is I think Ross, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but so basically we're not here to build digital twin in this kind of group. We are basically here to define the standards and basically define what can be called as digital twin at kind of different levels here. I don't think the expectation is we develop digital twins and kind of make it ready for the communities. Is what data needs to be added, and basically how the system can go from a simple CAD model to a model with metadata and then simulation, and going all the way to digital twin, that different kind of type of digital twin can exchange data with each other, how we can read the telemetry data and so on. So these are basically the things that we need to define a standard here, not to provide solutions.
Yeah, 100% agree. Okay, so coming to towards the end of our time, I should be able to put some time into this this week, kind of push it forward. If we reach the point where it's kind of a good draft, I'll send out a notification over groups. Hopefully everyone will receive it. I can add in some CCs as well if required. For any kind of initial feedback, and then hopefully we'll be able to submit it to the DCF call on the 17th. Matthew, do you have anything else to add?
No, other than I think I should be able to put some time in this. I think I mentioned earlier it's a bit of a fraught. Well, not fraught. It's a very busy time at the moment in our development schedule. But I think I've reached a point where I probably can put some time in to kind of make some of those bullet sections into prose and stuff. And yeah, other than that, as and when we get feedback on the presentation, I'll update. Again, I think like groups.io is going to be the primary option, but I can CC people if they'd like. I think to some extent we can a lot of the main contributors so far we've got email addresses of, so we could probably just try and put them on CC for stuff about both the white paper and the presentation, as well as using the groups.io. And maybe try and understand from the OCP, if people aren't getting these messages, it must be something that people have had before, if the OCP uses groups.io widely. So maybe we just need to try and find out if they've got a groups.io whisperer who can explain what's going on. That's all for me. And just to confirm, I'm going to take the QR code for a poll out of the presentation and make it groups.io QR code and reference the fact that we'll be doing a survey. Try and manage it that way.
Yeah, sounds good to me. Okay, shall we call it there?
Yep, works for me.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, folks.
See you in 2 weeks.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.